Welcome back to the Alcohol-Free Revolution podcast. We are into February. How are you feeling, Steve?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm looking forward to meeting up tomorrow.
Yeah, we're off
Yeah.
to see Catherine Gray. See if we can get her to come on the pod, or maybe at least get a little short video of you and me fanboying her.
Yeah,
So
should be
yeah,
fun.
that's going to be our little trip down to the coast for a book
Yes,
signing.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, other than that, how's your week been?
It's been a bit of a strange one, to be entirely honest. I had a bit of a weird experience on Friday. So I
Oh,
had
go on.
a journalist from The Sun reach out to me wanting to write a story about a post that I'd put up on LinkedIn.
Not
And the
to put you
post,
on as a page seven fella. No, that's showing my age. Isn't it?
I did that about 10 years ago, and yeah, no, it's fine.
Yeah, fair enough.
No, so basically, I put a post up on LinkedIn, which sort of showed me in what I kind of would consider my rock bottom moment. I never really had a rock bottom moment, but if there ever was one, it was this. I've used it before. Basically, I had to got pulled out of the Thames on my 46th birthday because we'd hired a boat, me and a bunch of mates, and we'd been drinking all day, and it was a really hot summer's day. It was in August, and I jumped into the Thames and just swimming around, having a lovely old time. And I was so out of shape, I couldn't drag myself back onto the boat, and I was basically stuck in the water. I couldn't get out. The banks were too high, and it wasn't a life-threatening situation. It was just really funny for most other people other than me. And at the time, I found it perfectly funny. But then all these sort of photographs and videos emerged the next day that my friends had taken. And there's one of this chap trying to pull me out of the water, and I'm just this big, bloated, drunken 46-year-old man, and it was all very embarrassing. But I use it quite a lot in social media to sort of, lay myself bare, as it were, and sort of show that, I'm not just this guy who's holier than thou, alcohol-free guy that, I used to be
Mm.
bit of a boozer as well. And anyway, I put it up on social media, and it got a fair bit of traction. And it popped up on this Sun journalist's timeline because we had a couple of mutual connections. And she emailed me and said, would I be open to them writing a story about it? And I felt a little bit uncomfortable about it anyway, because about 2 weeks ago, I'd put a post up criticizing the Sun for their position on do you remember the story that came out about drink driving, about how
Yeah,
they,
yeah,
the drink driving limit had been lowered, and they positioned it on their front page as being another blow for the hospitality
yeah,
industry. And I kind of put
yeah.
that out, and that got a bit of traction as well. So, and a lot of people were criticizing the Sun, rightly so, because they are pretty deplorable. But had a conversation with this journalist about doing this post. I thought it'd be a good way of getting a bit of additional exposure. And what she was basically saying was that they were going to portray me as like some drunk, who had to be rescued, and I just didn't really like the angle in which they were going at. Um, and I said, yeah, I'm not really too sure about this. And all of a sudden, she basically went, "Well, we can do it anyway, without your consent."
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and I was a bit like, are you threatening me?" And she was like, "No, I'm not saying." She's saying, "I'm not saying I would, but anybody else could because it's out in the public domain." And I was a bit like, "Ooh, I don't like this at all." And the kind of the way I felt about it afterwards was basically that she'd kind of threatened me, and I guess I'd gone into the call without any kind of expectations of what this journalist was going to be like. I thought she was just going to be a regular person. But if you can imagine what a tabloid Sun hack journalist would be like, that's exactly what she was like. And I just came away thinking, ugh. So yeah, that was a big no-no. But yeah, it all made me feel quite uncomfortable and kind of quite weird. So
So you've not seen the front page of the Sun this morning, then, no?
well, here's the thing. I'm kind of battling down the hatches because, like I said, I've basically not gone back to her since. I said I'd speak to her on Monday about it, but I decided pretty much as soon as I put the phone down that not doing that, definitely not. So I'm kind of bracing myself for something that's going to pop up on their website of that picture of me. So
Oh no, good on you.
if
Why
anyone
should you?
sees it,
Why should
yeah,
you? Yeah,
not
if you want
not
the real truth,
nice.
don't buy the Sun. Come
Don't
to
buy
the
the Sun.
Alcohol-Free Revolution podcast.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, good on
So
you, mate.
that's
That's well
that's
done.
that's my event, my news for this week. What about you? Much going on?
Uh, Not a great, well, not a great deal. Just like I said, had a bit of a birthday celebrations last week, and kind of moving on. We're looking, yeah, not a lot going on. Looking forward to catching up
Yeah.
tomorrow, and kind of yeah,
So that
just.
that obviously popped up on our community call this week, didn't it? That I forgot your birthday.
I wasn't
Having
expecting you to mention that
Oh
on the call.
God, I just felt so guilty. I felt so after we did the community call on Monday, It turns out I was shouting quite loud about, "Oh my God, I forgot! I can't believe it!" Chris, that my wife was downstairs working in her office. She was like, what's all that shouting about? What were you making all that noise for?" And I didn't realize quite how animated I got. But mate, you must have told me. I must have heard that story about dry January and about your birthday being the 1st of Feb, literally 6 or 7 times. And we'd only discussed it on the pod the previous week, and I still forgot your birthday, and I feel
Yeah.
terrible. Do you know what?
See,
I'm gonna tell you something else. One other thing. Obviously, we're meeting up tomorrow. So I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and buy him a bottle of Zeno wine. Buy it, not get a free one because I've drank all of that. I'm going to go and buy a bottle of Zeno wine for you. And I went to Waitrose. They've only bloody sold out. I couldn't get one. But the thought
oh
was there.
mate. Oh well, there you go. The thought, is that
So you're not getting fuck all, but the thought was there.
you're gonna you're gonna drop that in the car on the way down tomorrow. By
I
the way, I
was,
did
yeah.
actually go to the shop and tried to get you something, but listen, it's not that. It's not the end of the world. But you're not the best advert for going alcohol free, making sure
Oh
you have
God.
clarity and your memory improves and everything else. You're not the best
Uh,
advert for that, if anything
I'm just
else.
a really
But there
shit
we go.
mate. That's all it is.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Oh God. So yeah,
But
that pot.
anyway, it's anyway. You are forgiven
Thank you,
for
mate.
this year. Anyway, I'm not celebrating being 53. Anyway,
I
it's
mean,
just
it's nothing to celebrate, really, is it?
nothing
53.
to
Let's be
celebrate.
honest. Yeah.
Nothing to celebrate. Oh, actually, it is something to celebrate. Of course, it is. You know, healthier and better off now than when I was 35. So there we go.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um.
Exactly.
Anyway, who's on the pod this week, mate?
So we have got Matt Phelan on the pod this week from the Happiness Index, and well, as you know, we pre-recorded this that episode. We're going to introduce it in a second, but it was a great conversation, and Matt is one fascinating guy. The work that he does, he set up this company, the Happiness Index, over 10 years ago. He works with a lot of businesses. In fact, his CV is stellar in terms of the companies they've worked with. And he'll obviously explain a little bit more about what the Index is in a second on our interview. But I got so much out of this conversation, and we really went into some different topics to some of the things that we normally talk about. And
Mm.
yeah, it was a really good one. He's been on an alcohol-free journey for probably longer than us. He finds it quite. He doesn't put a date on it, which a lot of people don't do. But yeah, I think he's one that I really enjoyed talking to.
Good stuff. Well, without further ado,
Oh, just
go
before
for
we
yeah,
introduce
go
that,
for it.
actually, we should just we touched upon the alcohol-free revolution community there. So we had a call on a Monday, and we were chatting for a little while about your birthday, amongst other topics, and getting roundly abused. But anyone who wants to join the alcohol-free revolution community, it's growing every single week. We've got more and more people coming on. Where can people find out a bit more about it?
So yeah, I'm going to jump on here and just going to say, if you say, just send us the word interested to info@thealcoholfreerevolution.co.uk. But something else that came up and complete transparency with this is actually at the moment we're doing one call a week. We were doing a couple more. Um, and our Monday lunchtime is without a doubt our most popular. So we're running that at the moment. If you're out there and you've been having a think, and the one thing that's kind of getting in the way of you being able to join is the availability at that time, then either if you're interested, send the word interested, but equally feel free to pop down a date and a day of the week or a time of the week that works for you. And if we know that's what's preventing some people upping our numbers, then we're happy to look at that and see what we can do. So if you want to pop, I don't know, Friday 7 p.m. to info@thealcoholfreerevolution.co.uk, then please do, and we will do our very best to start opening up some more slots going forward.
Mm. Yeah, we have tried a few different slots, but it's trying to get one that works for the maximum amount of people. I think if you're somebody who was perhaps familiar with the over the influence community, that's ultimately something that we're trying to aspire to do to get to a large group of people where we can run more and more slots. But obviously, in order to be able to run more slots and more dates, we need to have a critical mass of people. So yeah, doing if it's something you're interested in, but Monday's not good for you, then yeah, just do engage with us. Drop us a note. Let us know your ideas.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, on with the interview then, I guess. This is Matt Phelan. Matt, welcome to the Alcohol Free Revolution podcast.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks, Steve.
Nice to meet
So
you.
we connected just before Christmas through a mutual friend, Gemma. Shout out to Gemma. And I think when we initially spoke, we found out loads in common, really connected, and really keen to get you on the podcast because I think what your journey has been one that's really fascinated me, and the work that you're doing in the corporate space with the Happiness Index, I think is going to be one that our listeners are really going to want to hear about. Before we get into the work that you do, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about how you've arrived at where you are today.
So my journey I know I don't like that word, James.
Adventure.
My adventure on alcohol free is probably more of a geeky one than maybe most of the guests that may come on. But I co-founded a business called the Happiness Index, and we collect data on what makes people happy in about 170 countries. We've got about 250 million data points. So if you imagine my world, I spend every single day looking at the data of what makes people happy. And everyone who's listening will know that when you work, whatever you work in, it does impact what you're like at home. I've seen this, like if you're an engineer, if you go around an engineer's house, suddenly they're thinking about like the layout of the kitchen. If someone's a sound engineer, they're always thinking about how the acoustics of a building. And that also happens with happiness. And I realized that whenever I drank alcohol, the next few days I was much unhappy, way more unhappier than I was before. So the geeky part of me thought, well, we've got all this technology at the happiness index. So our technologies are always used for companies that are measuring the happiness of their employees. But I had the privilege of, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to track myself. So I took my own data over a period of time. And what I discovered is that alcohol for me, and I always say this, I'm a sample of one in this study, because the happiness index study is all about work, and I think 5 million people that we study. For myself, this is a sample of one. But what I found is that when I looked back at my data, it worked like a happiness loan. So if you looked at my data, when I drank alcohol, it would bring happiness forward. But then if you looked at my data, I would pay it back. But my conclusion is that there was a really high APR to pay. So I was bringing forward happiness, but what I was paying back was that it was an APR that I wasn't prepared to pay. Now, it took me a long time from that moment to become alcohol free, but that was a starting point. So I don't know if that's the same as anyone else, but that's my very geeky way of how I got to where I was, James and Steve.
A payday loan.
That's how I felt. That's exactly. I've never called it a payday loan, but
Well,
actually, that's exactly how it felt when I looked at the data. That's what I saw in the trend data, effectively.
I'm sure we've probably used that expression before on this pod. It's certainly something that Steve and I have spoken about, and certainly with some of our clients, it comes up. It's often use the analogy of a payday loan. You know, you get the money straight away, you get the stress relief for 20 minutes, and then after that, you're paying it back at a very high APR for quite a long period of time. And often we ask people, "Do you use payday loans?" And almost everyone says, "No, hell no." But
Yeah.
it is a really great parallel, I think. It's the
Yeah.
first time I've heard anybody else use it, and yeah, completely agree.
I
There's
think, and
a
then for me, everyone's brains work differently, don't they? And they get to different places at different points. For me, I had to see it on a graph. I had to see the data. And that's how I work. I'm evidence based. So for someone else, it might be totally different. But for me, that was the specific, as you call it, adventure, James and Steve.
no, my mind flicks to there's a James Corden. I think he's used that before about alcohol you're borrowing from tomorrow. How much of tomorrow do I want to borrow for today, and kind of paying it back. And it's so true. But I mean, interesting. I mean, I'd love to see the graph, to be honest with you. But how did you go about tracking it? What kind of how did you go around doing that?
Well, I was using the happiness index,
Mm,
which I mean, anyone can go on there now and you can benchmark all your employees. So you can do that for free. It doesn't cost you anything. But it's probably too much technology for what I was really using. If I was doing it again, I'd probably just plot it 3 times a day. I'd probably just out of 10, I'd just put it on my phone somewhere or on a notepad or on the wall, and I'd just score yourself your happiness out of 10 3 times a day or four
mm,
times a day. That's all I would do. I think that's all. Looking back, I was probably using too much because it's my work as well. But that's how I would do it. And then look back at your graph. You'd need a decent amount of time to do it for. But look back, and you'll see, like I saw the dips were worse than the dips were lower than the highs. And that's the graph I saw. And it was like that was it then imprinted on my mind that you know what, that's not a good investment. Let's look at this.
It reminds me a little bit of what people talk about nowadays with wearable devices in terms of seeing the
Mm,
data, particularly around sleep. It comes up an awful lot around, once you sort of see the impact that alcohol's having on your REM sleep and your deep sleep and all those things. But once you see the data, you can't unsee it. And I think that is really powerful because it's something that perhaps we didn't have maybe 5, 10 years ago. Because once you see it, it's, the genie's out of the bottle.
Yeah. And I think that for me, there was a huge connection to sleep because what I've realized now, how I've rationalized it, at 5, 6 years, I don't even know how long ago this was now. That's how comfortable I've got with it, is that I was in my 20s scaling a business that we built up rapidly, grew globally, and sold. So it's an incredible business. But I didn't have the tools because I was so young on how to switch off, how to relax, how to have balance, all the things that I've now gone on to learn about, which I'm not but anyway, some kind of guru or expert in. But because I'd come through those growing up years where alcohol had been that thing that I used to relax, the way that I dealt with the stress of this growing fast on the outside successful business, just the quick easy thing of, right, well, we'll just have some glass of red wine or whatever. Then all the stresses and all the problems of work went away. But where they came back was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, when
mm,
I would suddenly be awake and I'd be worrying about all those things that I had switched off at maybe 7, 8 o'clock when I had a glass of wine. And then that's when I started to notice that link in the data and the sleep thing. I don't actually track my own sleep, but I'm aware of when it's not great. But that was the first thing, like when I started to do all the things that lots of people would do, like dry January and sober periods. That was the first thing that I noticed. I was like, wow, the my sleep is so much better, and generally I feel better. But then you have to confront, like, what are you going to actually do about the stress? Which is why I also know people that have gone have alcohol and then suddenly they were just drinking because there was another problem. So suddenly you've got to confront that. Like, what do you do to get rid of that stress when you're worried about like losing that client or you've had that issue with a staff member? Like, you then have to go on another journey to fix what the original problem was, because alcohol is often just like hiding something else that is something that in your life that you need to face.
so was this something you kind of were feeling before? It was something you were curious about your relationship with alcohol before you started to then plot it? Was it a question you've been asking for a while, or was it just initially to kind of a bit of a penny drop moment that as you were putting the happiness index out there that you thought you'd track it on there to see how it was?
For me, the biggest change was children.
Yeah.
So when I was running a company, and I was single and not married, and I didn't have children, it there wasn't as much of a downside, aka you could just sleep all weekend or whatever. But once kids came along, the downside was I found that I was like parenting in a low energy way, aka
Mm,
I'd rather just sit on the sofa and watch a movie than go out for a walk in the woods with the kids or whatever. And that's where that for me that was the penny drop moment. And I'm not saying sitting on the sofa watching the kids watching a movie with the kids is a bad thing. That's still something I really enjoy doing.
mm, mm,
But when I caught myself doing that, like kids want to go and do this or do that, and in my head I was thinking like, what what are the low energy ways of doing stuff, if I'm really honest with myself. And that's where I thought, well, this is ridiculous. Like, I wanted to have kids. If I'm gonna anything that I do, I want to do well. Like, I'm only really focused on my family, my business, and my friends. So I've got a core thing here of being a dad, and I'm not doing it as well as I think I can. So that's when I started thinking about it, and then that's where my brain went into tracking it, Steve.
yeah, I can relate to that being a dad myself, and it's it's that equally was the same kind of when I started to really kind of question it for myself as well. But if you don't kind of if you're happy to share, how would you have kind of placed your relationship with alcohol before you started questioning it? Were you kind of middle lane drinker, or was it had it been kind of part of your life for many years? How did you kind of sit on that?
I would say for a British person, I guess there's an international audience here as well. I would say pretty normal, as in early binge drinking as a
Mm,
teenager, carried through to university, and then maybe like a Friday and a Saturday out with friends and so on. The middle lane drinking bit for me came with the world of media that I worked in. So I would, I remember someone said to me, I play football on a Wednesday night, and after Wednesday football, they said to me, "Oh, do you fancy going for a beer?" And I said, "If I go for a beer with you, I've drunk every night this week," because my week was kind of like maybe two or three, maybe two nights. An average week for me might have been two nights with clients, two nights with employees. So you're at four already. Then maybe a night with friends, five. Then a night out with my wife, six. So the only time that I wasn't, and I wasn't like if I was going with clients or going with employees, I was only drinking, like sharing wine around a table or having a couple of beers. It wasn't the point where I was then getting onto the harder stuff or that kind of stuff. But for me, 6 days, when I sometimes I look back and think, when you put all that together, that's 6 days. And I just thought that's just that when someone said that to me and I said, no, I can't go with you because of that reason, that's when I suddenly realized it just slowly crept up. So I would say it was lower levels of drinking, but consistency of it because of all the different things and all the, and I think also people pleasing as well. If like a friend, if maybe I'd been out a couple of nights for work and I went to see a friend, I wouldn't want to let them down. Or if my wife wanted to have a nice bottle of wine with me, I wouldn't want to let her down. So suddenly, and then, but the weird thing is when you get on the other side of it, when you say you don't drink, the amount of people who then flip it around, they're like, "Oh, I'm so glad you're not a drinker. I didn't want to drink tonight anyway, so it's really good to see you." And it's really funny now. On the flip side, I often get messages from people like, "I'd love to go out with you, Matt, because I just don't want to drink, but my other friends won't allow that." So you kind of think that you're going to get excluded from all your circles and it's going to be a bad thing, but there's a total flip on the side of it where there's certain people who want to hang out with you because actually they don't want to drink as well, but they're on again James's word, they're on a different stage of the journey.
That's such a fascinating insight because
Mm.
what you touched on there, Matt, it's the number one blocker for people who are thinking about alcohol free or questioning their relationship with alcohol is the whole social side, is that I'm going to be ostracized and I'm going to be the only one. But what you've just spoke about there in your own lived experience is what it's like for a lot of people when they do go alcohol free. People are curious, other people come out of the woodwork. Other people are almost waiting for somebody else to kind of go first. And then it's not like it was when we were 25 and we said, "Oh,
Yeah,
I'm not going to drink tonight." I was like, "What? Are you joking? Go on, just have one." And it happens occasionally, but it's
yeah.
when you get to more of the mid stage of life and the current level of acceptance around going alcohol free, it really isn't what you think it's going to be. It's a lot more positive, and you've just captured it so perfectly there.
But I want to also be honest that there are some people that do struggle with it, and I wrote
Sure.
a blog post about this. Like the weird things that you get called when you say you don't want to drink. Like I've been called a woman. Like how is that? I don't understand how that is a bad thing to be called. I've been called gay. Again,
Uh-huh.
I don't understand how that is a bad thing. I've been called boring. All these kind of things that I also, if there was someone listening and they're a middle lane drinker and they're thinking of, I also want to say is there's two sides of it, but they wrap around eventually in a really beautiful way where things change, but especially when you grew up in like the 80s and 90s like myself, so I'm 43 years old. If people remember like the movie, like the series The In-Betweeners, that's a
Mm.
pretty accurate representation of what it was like to go to school
For sure.
in Essex in the 90s. So there are situations that do occur, but what I want to say to people is it does flip round, then it becomes a real positive. But I never took any of those things as I never took them personally, and they never offended me. I just observed them and thought, this is odd that you are using that, and it tends to be, and this is the world. People don't in the world today. People like to split between. They like to polarize, don't they? But there's the people who said those things to me. They're people that are quite close to me, and if I look at the intention behind it, what they really wanted me to do is drink with them
Yeah.
for their reasons, and they're using what is today unacceptable language, but they're using language that they would have used maybe when we were at school. Like it's hard to imagine now, but um, like homophobic slurs and all that kind of stuff, whether people like it or not, were very common in
Mm.
schools in the 80s and 90s. And I
Mhm.
think it's important not to forget that as well. So there is light at the end of the tunnel, but I just want to prepare people that you're still going to get stuff like that. And it still happens to this day,
Mm.
just to say.
I'd have often got that. Again, quite often from the people closest to you as well, like you
Yeah.
said. But they would also be the kind of, and I think you're right. I mean, I'm older myself. I'm 53, but at the same time, it's yeah, I can very much relate to that. But they were also the sort of slurs you'd have got when you were drinking, if you were not the one that was buying the next round. You know what I mean? So they would kind of always present within that kind of circle of friends. But at the same time, yeah, it happened in the earlier sort of stages, but at the same time, the amount is flipped around now, and the number of my
Yeah.
friends that have kind of started to sort of look at maybe questioning their own relationship with alcohol, and sometimes maybe they are just questioning, or they want you, like you said, to be drinking with them. They want you to
Yeah.
be part of that circle.
And I'd just like to point out, and also how deep in society that was. If you look back at any of the alcohol advertising in the
Mm,
90s, it was built on this.
mm,
And most people that are imagining the people that said those to me are probably imagining that the people who said those things are men. But I would say it's a gender equal. Even
mm,
uh, those phrases are coming equally from men and women.
mm.
I'm guessing, I might be wrong, message me if I am wrong, but I'm guessing that most people are imagining another guy saying it to me. But that has come from women as well. So I think, which to me, that what that says is so many of those phrases and things and the way that we think about alcohol was deep in society, and a huge part of how alcohol was sold in the 90s. There's so many adverts that are coming to mind now that I can think. I remember one where I don't know if you both remember this, but there was one about why men shouldn't wear moisturizer. Do you remember that one?
Vaguely,
No,
yes,
I
this is
don't
coming
remember
to
that.
mind. Yeah,
It,
this is
there was one about men shouldn't wear moisturizer, and then it cuts and it does it like a football where they do like slow motion, and basically the guy's hand has got really smooth, and then the pint slips out of their
Oh
hand,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
break it down. They call it slippage.
yeah.
So again, like, you can't judge anyone because that was so ingrained in
mm,
society. That was totally normalized at the time. And you look back at this stuff and think it's absolutely ridiculous. But
Mm.
I also don't judge anyone because the world changes at such fast pace, doesn't it?
yeah.
I think you've got to recognize that as well. So I don't know really where I'm going on this point,
Well,
Stephen.
no, it's interesting. I think I sometimes reflect quite a lot on the marketing because I've got 10 years on you, and the marketing that I remember is Paul Hogan and the Foster's ads that was the kind of masculine Australian guy, and they're trying to. I think there was the one I remember where they were the ute was going to fall over the edge of the cliff or whatever. They had to kick the woman out of the truck rather than actually get rid of an extra case in case it tipped them over the edge or whatever. So it was, yeah, interested to see how it shifted. And because I would have got those kind of slurs mostly from guys, I would say, in
Yeah.
terms of my circle of friends. But I guess sort of into the 90s, that ladette culture as well, women drinking through that culture kind of very much introduced that into that. And they were drinking just as hard as the guys during that period of
Yeah.
time, if not harder.
That is exactly it. And then there's so much again, there's so much change, isn't there? But you look back and you think, wow, like, so I think I read in one of the books that I was reading when I was giving up alcohol, that when you drink alcohol, it reduces your testosterone.
Mm.
So the irony of all of those like adverts that people like Foster's, and it wasn't
Mm.
just Foster's, was it? They were
Castlemaine 4X.
Mm.
Yeah.
yeah,
Hoffmeister, Brother
Hoffmeister.
yeah,
Bear.
that whole thing that was built on testosterone
Yeah,
and that
yeah.
kind of thing. The irony is, if you're
Yeah.
having, if you're alcohol free, your testosterone levels for yourself are probably higher than if that you were drinking. So if you were doing a scientifically driven version of it, it should be the other way around. It
Yeah.
should be
Yeah.
if you were going to build on those stereotypes. But yeah, I hope I haven't given some crazy idea to an advertising professional out there now.
It's fascinating though to sort of unpack some of those social norms, because a lot of the time we don't really sort of go back and sort of think about why we have the views, societal views of alcohol and masculinity that we do. But when you start unpacking it all, and Steve mentioned there about ladette culture that happened in the 90s,
Mm.
and what you were saying earlier, Matt, with regards to, you kind of think that it's just men that are kind of making those kind of slurs, but actually it's women as well. And I think that came about as a result of this kind of this ladette culture where women were kind of egged on, I suppose, by the alcohol industry to try and keep up with men in terms of drinking, when obviously their physiology's different, and it's interesting how we all got to the place that we're in now
Yeah,
with
and
alcohol.
I guess marketers looked at it and looked at the percentages of male versus female drinking, and looked at it as a market, didn't they?
For sure.
Okay,
Mm.
like all brands do, don't they? If you were a supermarket today and 70% of people were coming in were men, you'd look at the female market and think, right, how do we encourage people to come in? So
Mm.
you can kind of understand where it all comes from, but I think it is important, especially someone who works with neuroscientists and psychologists, to remember that lots of us out there who have been drinking or not, fed so much information through marketing that we probably are not even conscious of today.
Mm. Mm.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I'd like to just wind it back a little bit. You touched on, we've obviously spoken a little bit about the happiness index, but I'm kind of conscious for people who've not come across it before. Could you give us a bit of an idea, a bit more what the happiness index is and how it came about and what exactly you do?
Yes. So it's thanks, James. It's famous for its benchmark. So anyone now can go to the happinessindex.com, any size business, you go to the benchmarking tab and you can see where your culture for happiness and engagements benchmarks globally against our data set. So that's like the bit that we're famous for, that we get quoted on, that we're appearing. The actual business is where, when people want to go beyond benchmarking, they want to get deeper into it. The happiness index has a technology platform, as you'd imagine today, AI enabled, all that kind of stuff that helps you analyze your data. So we've got customers from 100 employees to 400,000 employees. So they will then use our technology to crunch their data, work out where to prioritize resources, things that need to change. It's really the ears of the CEO, because the higher you are up in an organization, no matter how much of an open door policy you believe you have, you're getting a filtered view of what's really going on in the
Mm.
organization. So it gives the leadership a real view. And then the third bit is we connect culture to performance. So we work with everything from sports teams through to retailers, through to pub chains. I always say I've given up alcohol, but I'm pro pub, which is often forgotten. Um, is we then sit down and go, right, a bit like how I did with my alcohol journey and connected alcohol to my happiness, we connect their culture to their business metrics. So if we're working with sports teams, we might be linking their culture to gold medals. So we work with UK sports, we work with every sport in that group. We work with British cycling, loads of sports clubs around the world that you would know. In business, we're linking their culture to revenue, to profit. If we're working with, say, a care home, we'll be linking their culture to patient outcomes. Just to just to geek out a little bit, the largest ever study into this is across a data set of 1 million employees. That data set is the NHS employees in the UK. It was done by Sheffield University, and they found that if you have two hospitals exactly the same, the hospital with unhappier employees has a higher death rate. So when people come to this, they think, oh, it's the nice bit of business. Oh, maybe it's like the team building, or listeners can't see it. James got a lovely dog in the background, so I think it's like bringing dogs into work, and that's what they imagine. But really, it's a serious business metric. Employees that are happier are more productive, they're more creative, and their companies financially perform better. And I'm currently not quoting our stats at the happiness index. I'm quoting academic research from places like Oxford, Cambridge, and so on. So, in summary, we have a benchmark that you can use for free. If you want to go deeper, that's our core business, our technology business, and then we have a consultancy arm that connects culture to performance.
And how does, you know, obviously we're all about booze on this show, or
Yeah.
not, as the case may be. How does alcohol fit into happiness within a corporate structure? How do you look at that?
Well, I always think you've got to practice what you preach. So let's take the biggest thing that people that will have gets discussed is the Christmas party.
Mm,
So just to give you an example, our Christmas party is from 10 a.m. in the morning to 3 p.m.
good God.
And I have to say, I've also been the other side of this. Like when I had my previous company that we scaled and so on, we had a Christmas party in the natural history. We hired the Natural History Museum, and it was completely booze, dripping with booze. And yes, lots of us had an incredible time, but I also look back at that as a very non-inclusive time as a leader, because it was inclusive for me. But as I spoke to more people and I learned, I realized how alcohol can exclude so many people.
Mm,
Definitely.
mm,
And I was chatting to I was chatting to a, a guy that I know over Christmas. Where both families went for a walk, and he was telling me he works in media, and he was telling me that his company hired for this away day. This, I think he said it was a castle or a big country retreat, and he said something that just stuck with me. And he doesn't drink either, so we were sort of like bonding over that a little bit. They'd spent serious amount of money on this, and he said to me, he just said it as he was leaving. I can remember where we were. The kids were there; they were all on the climbing frames, and he said, "When I went to that away day, and remember, most HR people are putting these events on to bring people together.
mhm.
That's really what they're trying to do." He said to me, "I've never felt more alone than I did on that away trip."
Wow.
Because everyone, well, not this is the point, not everyone, a lot of people were drinking heavily,
Yeah.
and he just felt totally excluded. And the other thing about being an employer um, in London as well, in the UK, you're going to be recruiting, if you're recruiting as open as you can, people from so many different backgrounds, for different religious beliefs. So
Mm,
I have people in my workforce and had people in my workforce who can't drink for religious reasons. So
mm,
I think I talk about my own journey first, because I don't want to preach that you shouldn't have alcohol there. But I just think now, when you look at the data, if you look at it from an inclusivity perspective, you're putting something out there that isn't inclusive. And I go as far as making it, and the reason I use the Christmas example, I go as far as my own company of making it 10 till 3. And then guess what? We had our Christmas party 10 till 3 in one of our pubs, which is one of our customers, which is Fuller's, which I love. Fuller's,
Mm,
amazing brewery. Um, and there was an optional thing if people wanted to go for a beer and stuff afterwards, but it wasn't the bit that anyone feels like they need to go to. And we go to efforts to say, this is not where, because in a lot of businesses that the whole social hub is built around the alcohol, and that's what we're trying to get rid of. So that's in our own company. I'm not here to preach about what other companies should do, but I think they should have a look at it and think, is this an inclusive way of bringing people together?
It's an age thing as well, often as well, because a lot of the, we've had this has been debated back and forth a few times on the pod, but the general consensus is that actually the younger generation are not drinking anywhere near the, certainly my generation, and as that shifts, and the as you say, that I come from hospitality background, and I can remember some of the Christmas parties that I've been to over the years. And my God, if ever there was anywhere you don't want it to get out of hand, it's the Natural History Museum, because I
Yeah,
could imagine the bill could be quite hefty if that got
yeah,
out of place. But you're so right. It's just it just feel like it's shifted so much more. And when we had Andy Ramage on last year, talking about how businesses now are kind of trying to introduce, I don't know, maybe paddle or sports based kind of Christmas parties where maybe there's an opportunity to play crazy golf or something like that, that just kind of breaks that up a little bit just to be that bit more inclusive. I think it's definitely the way forward.
yeah. And the Christmas party is just the totem of it, isn't it?
Yeah,
There's so much stuff throughout the year, but
exactly.
it tends to be, and I think, again, I travel the world with this. I got back from Kuwait just before Christmas. I went to Kuwait with so many perceptions in my head around what I thought their culture was going to be like. Most
Mm,
of it probably what I heard on the BBC around the Gulf Wars and so on. I absolutely loved being in Kuwait, where there was not a drinking culture,
mm.
and there isn't drinking for religious reasons. And I spoke to someone else recently about it. It might have been you, James, that said this. It said they were talking about another country they'd been in where there's no
Abu
drinking.
Dhabi.
Yeah, about the calmness. Was it you,
Yeah.
James, saying that
Yeah, it
about?
was. Yeah, we were talking.
Do you want to share that, because
Yeah.
that's been my
It,
experience.
so I was still drinking at that point. So my wife Chris used to work for Etihad, who obviously the airline, who are based in Abu Dhabi, and we used to go to Abu Dhabi quite a lot. And obviously, there's no alcohol in Abu Dhabi in public places. They allow it in the hotels for the Westerners, but kind of begrudgingly. But I remember we went out to the cinema one evening and just went out for a meal, and we were just sort of out in Abu Dhabi, and it was just so calm. And because there was no sense of it could go off at any point. Do you know what I mean? Whenever you're out, if you were out and this was on like on a Saturday night at maybe about 10 p.m., if you were in any kind of high street in the UK at 10 o'clock, you're thinking, yeah, anything could happen. It could kick off. There's just drunk people everywhere. And yeah, it was so chilled and so calm. And I just realized it's because no one's drinking. And at that
Mm,
point, I was still, I was thinking, I was looking for somewhere where I could go for a beer, but I still was really conscious of just how chilled it was and how I just
mm,
didn't feel in any way threatened. And yeah, I completely agree with you on that. It was really noticeable, and obviously, culture cultures are different in lots of different respects, but certainly with regards to alcohol, it made me feel so much more safer and relaxed. It's much nicer place to be in that regard.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt. And again, I also think you got to remember who you used to be, because maybe 10 years ago, if you told me about going to a place that didn't have alcohol, I'd think, oh God, man, that's
Wouldn't
just
go.
yeah.
terrible. It's
Yeah.
terrible, almost like a threat to my freedom of choice. Like,
Mm.
I've seen it as such a, like, what's going on there? Now I'm like, this is amazing. And then again, the ability for children to be around those spaces, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you probably know better than I do, but Steve touched on it a little bit there about the age shifts, and and you also said as well about a lot of people, more people than you think, don't drink, and I think the latest data that I saw was around 20% of the adult population in the UK don't drink, which is about 10 million people,
Yeah.
and I don't think a lot of people realise that. And one of the things that a lot of people talk to me about, and the one thing I've seen in my own career, is a lot of the people that are organising, the work events and the Christmas parties and all that kind of thing, are all very well intentioned, but they tend to be, corporate leaders by definition tend to be older. They tend to
Yeah.
be midlife, our generation, and they're the ones making good, the decisions on what the event should be. But those are the people that are drinking the most in society, people of our age. Whereas, I think it's around 40% of people under 25 don't drink. And you see, and I've seen it for myself. It will be the directors and the corporate leaders who are at the bar getting the shots in, and the old culture that we spoke about earlier on in the conversation. And then look round at the kind of 25-year-olds and the people in their 20s, and they're looking at their watches at 10 o'clock thinking, can I go yet?
Yeah.
And it's just what you were speaking about earlier. It's not inclusive, and I
No.
don't think there's any kind of bad intention around this.
No.
I just don't think that people of our age necessarily have a broad understanding of that cultural divide and that shift that's happening within
Mm,
organizations. But one of the things I really wanted to ask you was, and again, I get asked this a lot, is, okay, well, I'm running a business, or I'm a corporate leader. What else do I do? What else do I do other than take people to the bar or have a Christmas party? And sometimes I'm a bit like, I don't really have an answer for you, but because what do you do? I've seen mention about paddle there, but I'm already a bit like, "Nah, probably wouldn't fancy that. What what else is there?"
We go back, because we're studying human beings all the time. We go back to what have human beings historically connected around. So if you think that, because they think one of the reasons that human beings became the species that we did versus other animals and other types of like apes and all this kind of stuff is our ability to tell stories. That despite all the other stuff, like our ability to share information and tell stories. So where we go to is, how do communities traditionally meet and group? And it's really, and when you start from that point of view, um, you then go back to the basics. So the thing that I notice when I travel around the world is how common and how similar human beings are. Because I always go there where I'll just say some countries out loud, and people will have a perception of what they imagine that country to be. So I'm just going to name some random countries: China, Iraq, Kuwait, Argentina, Brazil, South Africa, UK, USA, Canada. People will have these perceptions of what the people from that country will be like. But
mm,
studying this stuff and traveling all around the world, what I've realized is, yes, there are cultural differences, but what we have in common is way stronger. And wherever you go and you can actually chat to people off the record or in private moments, is they're always interested in the same things and connect around it. So it's food, music, dance, sport, which we mentioned around the paddle, and all of those basic things, and I'm sure you can list some more. So we always come together and do something that's just very human. So normally for us, when we'll come together we might make food together, or we might, like we did the Great British Bake Off as an example. We did that, like we all made bake cakes together. So I would just take it back to the real basics of human beings, and that's probably why paddle's coming out as an example. But if you just did sport stuff, that is also then that becomes a problem, because not everyone's into sport and they don't feel like they can. So you need to vary it, I think. But I think if you go to the basic thing that human beings sit around a fire and they share stories, you've got to kind of create that like tribe element within your organization. And you're going to have companies listed, like I said, like we've got companies of 400,000 employees. Not going to be easy. You can't get 400,000 employees around one table or whatever. But I think just take it back to the things that make human beings tick. The thing that I would encourage people to read is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. So for those that don't know it, it's if you've watched Gladiator, it's that emperor that's in Gladiator that's supposedly the really bad one. So that's his personal diary that he wrote to himself when he passed away. They found this personal diary and it was published into Meditations as an example. In World War One, they gave it to the troops to deal with the stress that they were going through. But if you read that book, the stuff that the Roman emperor is going through he's got all the same problems that everyone who's listening to this podcast has got. He's the most powerful person probably ever up to that point, but he's got the same human problems that we've got. And in that book is so much around human nature. So alcohol has been a historical way that people connect, but we don't have to always use alcohol. So, and it will continue to be. So I don't think alcohol is going to disappear from society. But I think our understanding of it and podcasts like this help that. So just think about what connects human beings and what didn't. Think about things that existed 2,000 years ago, because when you look at our data set, there isn't anything that makes people happy that was invented in the last 2,000 years.
Wow.
Are there any other insights that have come out from your data that you think are particularly worth sharing around alcohol?
I think the number one thing, and this is the challenge that everyone's got who's listening, and James, you touched on it a little bit, is the number one driver of happiness at work and at home is relationships. So one of the challenges I had from the age of like 15, 16 up to like my 30s, a lot of my core relationships were built around alcohol. So it was going out drinking with my friends. That's how we connected at university. Work then became that. So if you think about relationships, you're sort of asking the right question there at the beginning, James. Like we were talking about the Christmas party and connecting, but the number one driver is relationships. And that's why some people struggle when they, as you said, you both said, like people fear like, will they be excluded from their social networks? That's a real thing. So
yeah, for sure.
I think the number one thing to take from this is relationships, and think about like ways that you can build relationships that don't include, and paddle's one example of that. But I often find that people reconnecting with stuff that they were into before they drank is really good. So let's say you enjoyed art at school. Suddenly you go and you start hanging out, you go to an art club and you suddenly start painting. You haven't done it for 30 years. I had someone come to one of our events the other day. She was in a real like, she described it as like a meh era. But like when she was a teenager, she used to like do like dance competitions. So she started teaching dance to children. I, I always joke that I remember like the best New Year's that I ever remember was when the New Year's before we drank, and there's a computer game out called GoldenEye.
Mm-hmm.
On the Nintendo 64. I've
Have
actually
you
got a
have you got
copy.
it behind you there? Because I'm looking
Yeah,
at your
it's,
background, I can see it. I was
no,
thinking
that's
that
actually
that isn't an
that's actually
oh, it's
Zelda.
Zelda. It is an N64 game. I
But
was
it
looking
is
at it
in
thinking that looks like an N64 game.
yeah, it's in here somewhere. I'm looking for it. But like I always think about that because I think about like it's just four of us spent New Year's Eve
Yeah, yeah.
playing GoldenEye. It was the year before we started drinking. So I think if people think back to their childhood and think about the things they did for fun, most people have probably stopped doing that. And sometimes it's alcohol that replaced that. Think about like so it's about finding your passion.
Definitely.
And then have either of you read Atomic Habits?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So, Steve, can you explain Atomic Habits just for anyone that hasn't read it? Just, I'm putting you on the spot here because we haven't
Oh,
planned this.
thanks for that. Well, yeah, I mean, no, Atomic Habits, obviously, from James Clear, just kind of delves into how our habits are formed, and yeah, how we can everything we do is shaped around our habits, and our futures are shaped around the habits that we're doing now. But that's kind of how alcohol falls into it as well. I'm not the best at explaining it, but
Well,
it's well since.
I think, Steve, I think that's exactly it.
Yeah,
In simple terms, that's it. And but if you take Atomic Habits, read Atomic Habits, then
yeah,
apply it to happiness,
yeah,
that's where it gets super interesting because one of the things in Atomic Habits is about stacking together good habits.
yeah,
So
Habit
let's
stacking.
take something that a lot of people struggle with is like healthy eating, right? I'm really bad for I could eat if you gave me a packet of biscuits now and a cup of tea, I could eat that.
mm,
It wouldn't even I need to think about it. They'd be gone. So Atomic Habits would be like, right, okay, so you need to make it harder to find the biscuits, but then maybe you've got a group of friends that you eat healthily with, and you all have lunch together, and you all have the healthy food together. So you've stacked two habits together: seeing your
yeah,
friends, and healthy eating. If you put it through a happiness lens, and you what we call happiness stacking, that's where it gets super interesting. So let's take that park run as an example. We know that running might be good. We know there's a social element to park runs. By the way, for those that don't know what park runs is, go and Google it. It will be 9 o'clock somewhere near you. You'll be able to go on a park run. Brilliant. So charity doesn't cost anything. So that's like an example where you go running, but you run with your community. So
mm,
you've stacked two habits together. So when you start thinking about this from this perspective, and you think about alcohol, you start stacking together like maybe healthier things together and start thinking about your social community without alcohol. It becomes easier once you stack together things that make you happy. So seeing your friends makes you happy. Maybe you haven't played an N64 for 25, 30 years. Message me, you can borrow my one. And then you meet up with your three old mates and you play a bit of GoldenEye. You've reminisced with your friends, but you've done an activity that doesn't include alcohol. And then you add something, maybe you all go for a run afterwards, and you keep stacking and stacking, and that's where the magic happens.
it's making them easy as well, right? So that it's easy and it's enjoyable. It's like coming back to like you're saying there about park run, and park run's a great one. I speak to people about park run all the time because normally they're within sort of 2 miles of every household. Really, you're generally going to find a park run, but it's that if you are even something as simple as, and I've heard of people going to bed in their running gear or having it lying next to their bed for when they get up, so that they, like you say, that habit
Yeah.
stacking to actually make it much more easy in the initial point to kind of take out that questioning beforehand and then making
Yeah.
it enjoyable. So if I take my kids to, I say my kids, now one only goes to park run, but if I take him and he gets a PB, then we'll stop and get something, a treat at the end or
Yeah.
whatever it happens to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Just want to point out I got a PW the other day. It's like personal worst. I was like,
Oh, did you?
I was like, it's the worst I've ever run.
Well,
Anyway.
I'm also injured at the moment, so running is a sore subject for me at the moment. But
Quite literally. Yeah. It's reducing the friction, isn't it? What you're saying about in terms of, going to bed in your running gear. It's just, I kind of sort of say if you're going to join a gym, join one that's on your route to work rather than one where you've got to go 20 minutes the opposite direction, and just trying to
Absolutely.
reduce. That's what's so brilliant about Atomic Habits is he makes it so just digestible for people. It's got such great, just tips that you can very easily
Yeah.
enact.
So two follow-ups for everyone. There's a book I'm trying to people can't see it. It's a book called Design for Happiness by Paul Dolan. He's a lecturer at LSE. He'll be featured in our Global Workplace Happiness Report. Design for Happiness and Atomic Habits. If you're
mm,
listening, read both and then put the knowledge of the two together, and you will be hopefully happier, is what I would say.
Another good one actually is which kind of came before Atomic Habits is The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. I don't know if you've read
I've not
that
read
at all.
that.
That's
Not read
it's
that.
quite similar, but you can see kind of I think it was about 10 years before Atomic Habits, but a lot of the nexus of what James Clear expands upon comes from Charles Duhigg. He's done another book called Super Communicators, which is quite interesting as well. But we could quite easily go down a rabbit hole of of educational books. But one thing you were referencing there was your relationships and your connection. How have you found that with since you've walked away from alcohol? And actually, how long roughly is it, Matt? We didn't
Actually,
talk
no,
about that. You're not entirely sure, right?
I don't actually know. One thing I would say on my journey is that I tried to give up a couple of times and failed a few times, but I see
mm,
them as blessings because I don't have FOMO anymore. Because the first few times I did give up, I had a bit of FOMO, but then I went back, drank, and really regretted it. So I never have that feeling like, oh, you know what, it might be better if I have a couple of beers. I've had that, I've been through it.
Data points. You've got data points, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
absolute blessings for me. And I forgot what the question was now,
So,
John.
well, I kind of went off on a tangent. The first one was really, I wanted to talk a little bit more about your relationships and the connection. You spoke
Yeah.
about your friends, but also with your family and your kids. I'm kind of interested to learn a little bit if you feel more connected to them. But we're just trying to get a rough sense of how long you've been alcohol free. We're talking over 3 or 4 years, right?
Yeah, I'll definitely over
Yeah.
that. It was a conscious. The first time I gave up was supposed to be the Champions League final. People are going to hate me because I'm a Spurs fan, but I
Laugh at
went
you.
to I went to Madrid and I thought that's the way.
Pity
That's
you.
the way. I was in Madrid, Champions League final. I thought that'd be the way to end it. And I did probably 6 months after that, but then had a couple of beers on a uni reunion. Then a couple of times again, false starts. But then I wanted to have a beer with my brother the night before he got married. So I should know the date because I should know when my brother got married. But I don't. But I would say it's probably 5-ish years. And also it's just a small point. I don't say I've given up alcohol. I'm just not drinking it anymore.
Yeah,
I'm just
love
not
that.
drinking at the moment, but because I know the way that I work, if I give up chocolate, I just want chocolate all the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anything I give up, I will want all the time. So at the moment, I just see myself as a non-drinker. It's so down the line, I don't think about it. Um, but yeah, I think that's also part of my own defense as well by not knowing the date. It's not like this ticking thing. It's
Mhm.
just, again, I'm trying to think of something that I don't. It's funny because I mentioned computer games. I hadn't played computer games for years until recently. There's loads of things I did in the past that I don't do now that I don't think about.
What about smoking? Smoking is another good example, right? I'm sure at some point or another in your life you smoked a cigarette, or maybe more than one. But
Yeah, I'm a
you're
bit
gonna say
boring on
you're gonna
that.
say I've never
Boring
smoked
on.
though.
I'm a
But
bit boring on that front.
yeah, but people don't, people don't generally sort of say, yeah, I've been nicotine free now for
No, exactly.
4.5 years, and
Mm.
I
Yeah,
had my last cigarette on the. Some people do. I'm sure if you're habitually
yeah,
smoking 20 a day, but generally people be like,
yeah,
well, it's just not a thing. I don't need to
yeah,
say I'm never going to smoke a cigarette again in my entire life.
yeah.
I
And
just pretty sure I won't.
and how funny is that? I just called myself boring for not smoking. So I just did what
Yeah.
other people said to me. So again, it's a societal ingrained thing, some of these conversations, aren't they?
Yeah, for sure. So tell us a little bit about your relationship with your family and your kids. Now you've been alcohol free for so long. Have you been alcohol free since how long? Well, I suppose the better question to ask is how old are your kids? Were you have you got a period where you can compare how you were when you
Well,
were
they were when I did drink, they were really young, so they don't
okay?
remember me as a drinker. Um, but I've played with how I explain that because the honest answer to why I don't drink now is if I take all the data and I summarize everything, the reason I don't drink now is because I know that alcohol is a poison and it makes me unhappy. But if I say that to people that drink, that really offends people, so I
Mm.
don't say that.
It
But I
sounds
do.
sensationalist, doesn't it, to say it's
Yeah,
poison, but it's
it
true.
sounds horrific. Like if it it totally alienates people if you say that.
Mm.
But I do say that to my children because my children say, "Oh, why don't you drink, Dad?" And I say, "Well, I just did my research. It's a poison. Like it's like I think about. I'm worried about when I eat a salad whether it's like washed or not, because my sister used to work in that world of salads, and I know how bad like the chlorine and the stuff is that they clean the salad with. So
Oh, don't tell
if
me
I'm
that.
trying to think about like what I eat, like why would I put a poison in there?
Mm.
And I say, well, it just makes me sad. So so my kids think about it and talk about it a lot, but I have to be careful because then, like with my wife, I don't want to become a preacher. Then when my wife has a drink, sometimes my children are like, "I really don't want you to drink, Mum. I really don't want you to drink."
Yeah.
And I was like that with my mum as a smoker because me and my mum always joke about this. But when I was a teenager, my mum got in a bad crowd and started smoking, and but she didn't smoke when I was younger, and I hated the smell,
Really?
hated it, I absolutely hated it, and I remember that feeling that my children have about my wife that I had about my mum. And I was such a horrible kid that if my mum made me a meal and she'd been smoking, I refused to eat it. I would find her cigarettes, I'd tear them up, I'd chuck lighters out. Like I look back and I think, what a knob. Um, but my mum doesn't. She's just, mums, they just love no matter what, don't they? But she sees it as a good thing now. But we really did clash over it because my mum went from just smelling like my beautiful mum to smelling of smoke. She's an adult; she could do what she wanted. But that's how I felt. But but it doesn't cause a problem. But when my wife does drink, my kids are on at her, but I do try and say to them, look, she's an adult, you have to let, and she drinks a lot less now because I don't drink.
Yeah. How do you? We've never spoken about this actually, Steve. As a side point,
Yeah,
I
cool.
know your wife drinks a little bit, as
Yeah,
does
yeah.
mine. But how do your, because your kids know that you don't drink. What's your story around that?
So my kids are now 9 and 11, and I'll be alcohol free 5 years in June. So, yeah, so they certainly my eldest will remember will maybe not clearly remember, but will remember me as a drinker. Um, but there have been some real eye-opening moments where they really do. Yeah, I referred to this last year, didn't I, James? About that my son is a wicked little runner. He's doing really well in his running, and he joined a club near me called AFD, which is Aldershot Farnham District. It's an athletics club. And out the blue last year for I wasn't expecting it at all, but for Father's Day last year, which was roughly when he joined that club, I got a Father's Day card off him, and he had drawn a can of Lucky Saint on it, and he wrote AFD next to it and wrote alcohol free daddy. And it was just like, so how much they noticed really, really stood out. And they do notice it. Obviously, I'm now coaching for a living and being in that space a lot of the time. They know that that's what I do. They ask lots of questions about it. And I kind of, like you, I want to give them the truth, but I don't. But I equally want them to be as well educated and informed as they can be when that comes around, and approach it in a different way to maybe how I was introduced to alcohol, which was probably the same way as most people in the sort of 70s, 80s, and 90s, and given a small glass of wine or a little bit of brandy on a sugar cube to kind of whatever it happened to be. So I want them to be as educated as that, but they're 100% aware that this is what I do. But my wife does still drink. She doesn't drink anywhere as near as much as she did when we both drunk. But their awareness is so there, and it's just I struggle with it. I struggle with how to set it up because 35 years of my life I drank, um, and it's hard, isn't it, not to kind of when you're outside and you want to kind of give your two pence. I just want to be careful to yeah, I don't know. They're very, very aware of it. They see it all the time. They know what I do and the message that I'm giving, and I just answer the questions as best as I can.
How about with you, Matt? When your kids get a little bit older and they get to the age where alcohol's coming into their lives, what do you how do you anticipate that you'll approach that?
I'm really, really struggling with this subject right now.
Mm,
My kids are not at that age yet, but my friends' kids are, and they're telling me, and people from the UK might not from the UK might find this shocking, but they're getting the requests from the teenagers that are well below 18 asking their parents to go and get them some alcohol, and they know I'm just talking about my friend. They're saying they know if they don't get their kids the alcohol, they're going to go and get it somewhere else. So they're stuck in this like bind between,
mm,
do I enable my child and get them maybe some like lower alcohol beers versus they may just go and get like some harder liquor. Um, and I don't really, so my wife quite rightly has told me not to preach on this subject, but I love having conversations with people like you two, and it's a real passion of mine. So when it's relevant point and someone wants to, I will talk about it, but I'm not preaching to anyone. But I
mm,
am really stuck to what to do with my children because I'm so clear now because I've read everything, I've done the data, I've spoken to enough people. I know that it is a poison, and I know it makes you unhappy. And then I'm in the research of happiness, and I see the issues in society, and we can go on to lots of more of them. I really struggle with this because
mm,
Yeah.
my friends are doing that, and it is how a lot of people in the UK bond, and it's part of growing up. And I have no clue what to do on this subject. And maybe, perhaps, Stephen James, it could be a series. I think you could probably run on this,
mm,
because I think there'll be lots of parents. Because what do you do? It is illegal. It's illegal for under 18s, but
mm.
we all know kids go and access it. What do you do? I don't know. I'm really worried about it.
We talk a lot about the parallels with smoking a lot on this show and alcohol and how smoking is seen in a particular way and alcohol tends to get a free pass in a way that
Mm.
smoking doesn't. And I appreciate this alcohol's slightly different with regards to what you were talking about there in terms of social connection and people socializing. But you wouldn't let your kids, if your kids got to 14, 13, 14, they were like, well, I want to try some cigarettes. You'd be like, absolutely not. There's no way on earth I'm buying you cigarettes. But yeah, we would contemplate doing it with alcohol.
Yeah. It's
I
just,
I
yeah,
I
you're
was
right.
sent an example very briefly because I know it's kind of a long, it is a longer story, so I will keep it short. But it was an example sent to us by someone myself and James know, but won't share the name on the pod. But we can talk about it afterwards, James. And it was a public school, and they were had an allowance in place at the school prom.
Just for that, Steve, just for definite, because around the world people call, are you talking about a
Private
paid
school, a private
private
paid
school?
school in
Yeah.
the UK, and
Very different around the world.
a very well known one, where they were allowing kids underage to have alcohol at their prom, and on top of that, they were allowing them to be breathalyzed, or they were making sure they were breathalyzed so that they were only having a certain amount. Two members of two pupils at the school, and no doubt a lot more, smuggled some more alcohol into the venue, had more, got to a state, probably by no fault of their own, because they're young and they're in that impressionable and in that environment where they were then breathalyzed after the event and disciplined, almost expelled for their behavior, where the alcohol had been made available to them in the first place, and they were expected by the school to be allowed to drink underage, but only to a certain level. And that's how
Yeah.
they were being introduced into it, which just blows my mind.
Yeah, I can't even get my head around that.
No,
And it's really hard, isn't it? Because we've all said like probably all drinking at that young age.
yeah,
So it's really difficult. But and it comes back to the cultural point, which is that for me, anyone that's listening that's thinking about giving up, is the books will tell you it's like 3 to 4 months for your body to sort of like get used to not having it, going back to the habit point. But
Mm.
I think it's a minimum of 3 years for society to get used to you as a non-drinker, because you have to go to X amount of weddings, X amount of funerals, X amount of birthdays. You need to have 3 Christmases
mm,
where people realize, and I hate calling it a brand, but you get a brand as a non-drinker to the point where nobody
Oh
offers
yeah.
you anymore because they're so used
yeah,
to the fact that you're not a drinker.
yeah,
Um, and that's that again, you're basically, that's because society has alcohol so ingrained in it. And the conversation that we're having about the kids is that's why it's really difficult as a parent, because it's really obvious when you put it in James's thing, like you wouldn't smoke, you wouldn't buy someone something this dangerous. But then as a parent, you've got that challenge of, if all of their friends are, and it's part of society and you've done it yourself, you're in this kind of bind again where you don't want your child to be excluded from what many people see as a rite of passage of growing up and so on. So it's like, it is
Mm.
such a mind
mm,
F
mm,
as a parent. I'm just
mm,
totally struggling with it.
mm.
I'd imagine it's a completely side topic, but when you're speaking in that way, Matt, I'm also thinking about mobile phones in exactly the same
Yeah,
context.
as was I. That was exactly going through my mind at that moment because
Yeah,
that's exactly what we're struggling with at the moment, particularly at that
yeah,
age. About and I know that's massively in the press at the moment in terms of
yeah.
how damaging they can be as well.
Yeah, don't envy you both in that.
I'm sure there's definitely
Yeah,
another episode
yeah,
available on the pod.
yeah. You've definitely
Oh,
got me thinking. Actually,
my dad's so helpful on that subject. He just says exactly what you said, James. He goes, "Don't envy you guys. It's a lot harder
Mm.
now." And then that's it. He doesn't say anything else. That's it.
no,
No advice. It's
he
gone.
Cheers.
just uncorks a bottle of red.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah, I'm still sticking to the 70s science. It's good for my heart. Crack on.
Exactly,
But
exactly.
oh, Matt, honestly, thoroughly enjoyed speaking with you today. Is there
Yeah.
anything else that you'd like to add that, just from the happiness index perspective, that any insights that have come up that you haven't shared? Is there anything at all that you think might be relevant for our audience?
The only thing I would add, there's so much research around how you're the average happiness of those around you. Um,
Oh, I
which
love that.
the
Brilliant.
problem with that is you can look at it negative and positive. You go, okay, I'm going to get rid of everyone that's unhappy in my life, couldn't you? If that was the case, or you
Yeah.
could look at it and go, right, the most selfish, brilliant thing I could do to be happy is to make other people happy. So there's really so much research around how being kind, benevolent, and being good to other people makes you happier. So I'd encourage people to be selfish by trying to make other people happier. But the thing that I would like to take from it is to link happiness and alcohol is happiness is a team sport. And for me, going alcohol free, it was a team sport. There were so many people that supported me along the way. There were so many people who didn't, but there's so many people who did. And I think this podcast, you can obviously seek out people like James and Steve that do this for a living. You don't have to do it on your own. And there are so many people out there to speak to. Just chat to people, chat to James, chat to Steve, drop them a message. It's a team sport. You don't have to do it on your own. There's plenty of us out there that have gone through you don't like the word James journey, but it is a journey. And you don't have to do it alone.
Oh, hallelujah.
Love
Matt, if people want to find out a bit more about you, I'm conscious you do a lot of corporate speaking as well, and obviously the Happiness Index. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so connect on with us on LinkedIn. Send us a message. If you want to benchmark your company, it's thehappinessindex.com. If you want to book me as a speaker, it's mattphelan.co.uk. No one can ever spell my surname. It's Phelan. I speak all around the world, and really weirdly, I'm from Essex, but I used to watch loads of Neighbours and Home and Away. And wherever I speak around the world, there is an assumption that I'm Australian or New Zealand.
I'm going to share something with you here. I was on Home and Away.
No.
What?
I was on Home and Away.
Cliffhanger.
I was on it. Yeah, there you go. I'm going to leave that.
What?
You can't leave that, Steve. What were you doing
Well,
on there?
very brief. I went in my backpacking days around 95, 96, living in Bondi, and my brother and some good friends came over to visit for a few months. We decided to take a drive up to Palm Beach, I think it's called, which is Summer Bay, where Home and Away was filmed, because it was huge at that time. We were just on our way. We hired this sports car for the day. I think it was it my 30th? No, it was before that. Anyway, we're driving around and decided to head up to the area where it was filmed. And out of the blue, out of a white trailer, pops Isla Fisher. I know. And she said, we started chatting to her, this horrible bit old VHS of me kind of chatting to her, clearly thinking that I had a chance, which was clearly not the case. And she said, "Oh, we're filming tomorrow, and we need some people to be in the audience. We're filming a gig on the beach. So could you guys come back, and would you like to be extras?" And we're like, "Yeah, absolutely." So we came back thinking, "Oh, we'll never get on. We'll never get on." And lo and behold, the video's still out there somewhere, and I'm on there.
Oh,
and me and my
I've got to
brother
see
and we're
that.
all on there. I'm wearing this VB shirt from a bar called the Woolshed in Cairns. And
Yeah, I've been there.
have you been there? Yeah,
Yeah.
that was definitely during my drinking days. And yeah, and we were on it, and a good bit on it as well. Like they just said, "Don't look at the camera, don't look at the camera." But every time the camera caught me, I'm staring straight at the camera, pretending to dance to this. But I'll dig it out for you, James, someday.
I've got to see that.
You have to start signing stuff now.
That's it. That's it.
Wow.
Isla Fisher missed out her opportunity, but I'm not going to go. I'm not bitter about it at all.
I was going to say, yeah. Your loss is Sacha Baron Cohen's gain.
Exactly.
They split up now, but anyway,
we
great story,
digress.
Steve. Matt, brilliant to meet you. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been great.
And yeah, if you've ever got any time in the future, we'd love to get you back on, because I feel like we could talk for another hour. But thank you so much for being so generous with your time.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt.
Steve, thanks for what you do. So I think it's really important that these conversations are had. So it's a pleasure to come on and add the happiness angle.
Good stuff.
Thanks very much.
Thanks so much. Take care, Matt.
Take care. Thanks.
Bye-bye.